The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Buddha's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. Previously, we've already covered on the 5 aggregates and the 6 entrances, and today we will get to the 12 ayatanas, or the 12 places. Today we will cover on the form and seeing. Initially, I wanted to bring a crystal ball that everyone could see, but the one that I have at my home is rather very heavy. So later when I talk about the form, then you can look at a Buddha statue that's right in front of you, or you can prepare anything that's right in front of you so that you can look at it. And then by gazing at that thing, we will talk about what this eye consciousness is. We'll talk about the production of eye consciousness. So that's the first thing that we will talk about. And then later we will also talk about the sound and then hearing. Later we will also play a sound, a piece of sound or music recording. After that, we will also cover on fragrance. Usually we have some incense that's burned over here. For those of you who listen to this class at home, you can also light an incense at your home or anything that's fragrant to your nose. And we will talk about how fragrance is connected to the nose. In the Vajrayana teaching and the empowerment, especially, usually we will cover the 6 roots, the 6 places, and the 6 consciousness. By looking at those, by having those experiences, we'll recognize our nature of mind. Let it be nature of mind, nature of consciousness. In fact, at first glance, the Surangama Sutra, it may seem that it's no other than some Buddhist logic, but if we were to look further with it, it could help us to recognize, in fact, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, or the form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. We will be able to make observation and see how they are and what are the causes and conditions that produce them and how we grasp onto them. At the time of grasping onto them, in fact, there is no solid existence to any of those at all. People usually would say that, oh, if I see it, it must be true. If we hear it, it must be true. But those are no other than our habitual patterns. To break this cycle of habitual patterns is not that easy in our mind stream. In fact, there is a very deep clinging to habitual tendency, and that could make us have lots of confusion. After we have confusion, then the appearance would be even more solid. Just like a chronically ill person, for example, who has jaundice, whatever that person looks, they will be in the color gold or yellow. Since this is a chronical illness, that patient has to take medicine and to take care of him or herself, and then slowly that illness or that symptom will be cleared, and then the clarity of seeing would appear. Many of you have already studied Beacon of Certainty and many sutras and shastras that discuss about that, so it must be very simple for you to understand. But I think through the direct teaching from the Buddha, through this direct pointing out instructions, you will be able to recognize what the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and nose consciousness is. You'll get more clarity on it. Now let's continue with today's teaching. The Buddha said, moreover, in Tibetan's Dine. And then the Buddha over here says that after giving teachings on the 6 entrances, the Buddha said, moreover, Ananda, why do I say that the 12 places are basically the wonderful nature of true suchness, the treasury of the thus come one? Why the 12 places are the wonderful nature of true suchness? In Vajrayana teachings, there are clear explanations of the nature of the 12 ayatanas. But in Sutrayana over here, it is simply gives the gist of it. It simply says that the 12 ayatanas are simply the wonderful manifestation of the luminous Buddha nature. It is simply in a manifestation. How does it manifest, you may ask? Well, if we were to look at it from the second turning of the Dharma wheel, first of all, we need to come to the certainty that it is empty. However, there is non-extinguished manifestation. And that is just the nature of Buddha nature. That is the character of the Buddha nature, because it has that wondrous function. There are lots of terms to describe it, wondrous manifestation, the function. But if we were to understand the Surangama Sutra, in fact, it indirectly talks about the luminous Buddha nature. Therefore, lots of the wise ones place the Surangama Sutra as one of the sutras that talks about the third turning of the Dharma wheel. So over here, the Buddha asked Ananda, well, you said that the 12 ayatanas are the Buddha nature. But over here, Ananda doesn't really want to reply anymore. It seems that Ananda started to keep quiet. Maybe he's really smart. He knows that if he doesn't even answer the Buddha will continue to expound. So he doesn't really talk anymore. After the Buddha posed the question, since Ananda did not say anything, at the beginning, Ananda responded lots of questions, but maybe at this point, Ananda got quite tired. Therefore, he didn't really respond to Ananda's respond to the Buddha's question. And then the Buddha continued to say, Ananda, again, let's look at the 12 ayatanas, and the description of the 12 ayatanas are talked in pairs. For example, the eye with the form, and the ear with the sound, and the nose with the fragrance. It is talked in such a way. Over here, the Buddha said that, Ananda, look again at the trees in the Jet Grove, and the fountains and the pools. What do you think? Do these things come into being because of the forms are produced, and thus the eyes see, or does the eyes produce the characteristic of form? The Jata Grove, as we are aware, there are lots of trees and fountains and pools.
我们现在就是我们如果当做阿难的话呢，我们前面可能大家都在房子里面，就是没有那个树林和没有水泉，但是你们自己就是前面也可以看，如果有一些树啊，
since we are trying to walk in the shoes of Ananda, we probably don't really see those trees and the fountains and so on because we're sitting in a house. But you can look at other things. For example, a statue, the Buddha statue, or pole, or whatever things that you're looking at. Over here, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, look at our environment. It's really beautiful. There are forests and the fountain and spring and the pools. It's really beautiful. Now, what do you think? Do these things come into being because the forms are produced and thus the eyes see, or because the eyes produce the characteristic of form? The two questions. First is that is our seeing produced because of the environment, or is it produced because of the eye faculty? It seems very easy. It seems such an easy question, isn't it? But now you can think about this question. How would you respond to the question? What would be the downfalls if the seeing comes from the eyes or seeing comes from the environment? The Buddha continued to say, Ananda, if the organ of sight were to produce the characteristic of form, then the nature of form would be obliterated when you see emptiness, which is not form. Once it was obliterated, everything that is manifested would disappear, since the characteristic of form would then be absent. Who would be able to understand the nature of emptiness? The same is true for emptiness. Now let's look at the first one. If you were to say that it comes from the eye faculty, because if it were to be produced from the eye faculty, then when we see emptiness, when we see space, it is not forms, because space is non-form. Emptiness is not form. Once it was obliterated, everything that is manifested would appear. Since the characteristic of form would then be absent, who would be able to understand the nature of emptiness? Everything would be empty, everything would be gone. Everything would be absent. Whatever we see in front of our eyes would be just like space. All the varieties of forms and the characteristics would be absent. But of course, that's not true, because whenever we open up our eyes, we would be able to see all kinds of forms. We see it with our direct perception. We would be able to see everything that's manifesting. So that is not true. Since the characteristic of form would then be absent, then who would be able to understand the nature of emptiness? Because form and emptiness, in fact, they are related to each other. If we can see it with our eyes, in fact, there are two possibilities. The first one is that our eyes could perceive form, and the other one is that the eyes cannot see anything, which is emptiness, just like seeing the space or emptiness. The other day, when we made the analysis that if we were to see light, then we would not be able to see darkness, or if we see darkness, we won't be able to see light. And there is no third possibility. For the same reason, if the form that we perceive if we can perceive form, then we won't be able to see emptiness, and if emptiness, then not form. Because they correlate with each other. They are existent only because the other one exists. In the Heart Sutra, we talk about how form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Because if there is no form, then there is no emptiness. If there is no emptiness, there is no form. Earlier, we talked about how earlier the Buddha said that if you were to say that the root of the eye faculty to produce the form, or to say it the other way, that if the I faculty were to produce emptiness in that way, seeing the form at that time, then there is no emptiness. Then there is no emptiness. There is absence of emptiness. Once there is absence of emptiness, then there is nothing. Because the opposite of form is emptiness. If form doesn't exist, so does the emptiness. If emptiness doesn't exist, so does the form. Now the second question, if moreover the defiling objects of form were to produce the I seeing, if one were to say that the I to produce the form is incorrect, this is something that we studied in Buddhist logic. It says that the object, which is the focal condition, along with our dualistic mind and the I faculty, with all the causes and conditions matured, then there is I consciousness. If one were to say that the object, let it be garden or fountain, whatever they are, only when they exist, then there is the product that is seeing. If you were to say that, then you're saying that I consciousness derived from the form. Now let me ask you, when I look at emptiness, because emptiness is definitely not form, in this way, do I see emptiness or not? Because the cause of seeing is simply empty. Therefore, the logical inference is the same as the previous ones. Then who would be able to understand emptiness and form? Since emptiness and form, they rely on each other to be existent or to manifest. Therefore, if one were to say that, oh, I'm looking at emptiness, this is not reasonable and it's not valid. But people may think that, well, it doesn't matter because sometimes I would look at the forest and sometimes the forest would give birth to my I consciousness. And later I would look at the darkness or sometimes I would look into the space. Therefore, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be one existence and then the other one needs to disappear if one exists. In fact, this one we've also analyzed this particular grasping before. It simply shows that our grasping is a grasping to totality, is a grasping to a solid existence as a whole. So over here, the key of understanding it is that everything that we can perceive, the form, are no other than the production of causes and conditions. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that everything derived from causes and conditions, therefore they all uptake the false nature or false characteristic. All conventional phenomena are a product of falsity. And within its absolute truth, in fact, there is no arising, there is no production at all. We should understand that. Therefore, you should know that neither seeing nor form nor emptiness has a location. For this reason, we can come to this particular conclusion, that is, the root and the location, they are both empty. The 12 places, the 12 ayatanas, in fact, the I faculty is considered as one place as well. It is not existent either. And thus, the two places of form and seeing are empty and false. The form and seeing are both empty and false. Their origin is not in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. then what is it? It is exactly like how we already talked before. In absolute truth, it is devoid of the four extremes and the 8 elaborations. In the conventional sense, it manifests just as a dream and as an illusion. There is nothing that is truly existent. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, that's the true nature of it. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that the mind of the 3 realms are confused. Therefore, there are all kinds of seeing. The dream and the conventional phenomena are completely equal. The seeing that we experience are no other than the seeing that we have in our dreams. They are of great equanimity. If we can reach to that realization, that level of realization, that would be wonderful. Since nowadays our biggest obstacle is that we grasp onto what we see, and we hold on to what we see as truly existent. Therefore, whatever we see, we hold on to it as truly existent, and we look at, for example, your fireplace is truly existent, same as your lamp, your bowl, your cell phone, your laptop, and your scriptures, everything. You see them as truly existent. So today, with this kind of method of making observation, just like how the Buddha led Ananda to make this observation with the objects of the forest and fountains in the Jeta Grove, why don't you also look at the connections between your object and your seeing? Not sure if Ananda understood it because he's not really saying anything, but if we can make this observation, we will be able to see that from the beginningless time, we kept on thinking that I see this, I see that. Your teachers and your parents kept on saying that, what do you see, and do you see this and that? In fact, we had never truly investigated the seeing. With this method, we will be able to, with this method of making observation of seeing, then we will understand that the seeing is truly unattainable. That is why whenever we receive the Ati empowerments, usually there is a crystal that is presented, a pure and transparent crystal. At that time, you're looking at it. In fact, your mind is exactly like that, and same as all the forms. It is completely transparent without any obstruction. Through this way, you will be able to recognize your own mind. Now we've already covered the first 2 out of the 6 that we're going to talk about. The next one is sound. What sound do we have? Right. I do have something prepared. Now the second one, the second ayatana is sound and ear. The Buddha said, Ananda, listen again to the drum being beaten in the Jeta Grove when the food is ready. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that continue to listen carefully. At the time of meal, at the beginning of the meal, in order to gather all the Sangha together, there is the sound of drum. But usually, when we chant the sutras, we will beaten the drum, and then entering into the retreat, we will also beaten the drum. But usually, whenever we have meals, we use the gong. Strike the gong and beaten the drum. In some monasteries, sometimes nowadays in China mainland, they would use the woodfish usually around 3 or 4 a.m. in the monastery, the wood fish would be striked to signal the practice. It is said that the usage of wood fish is because the fish's eyes are always open. Therefore, it is a sign to signal the practitioner or to remind the practitioners to be diligent and do not sleep too much. There's another story that I heard from some Chinese monk. He said that there was once a person who made great negative karma, and this person was reborn into a giant fish in a lake. And then on the body of the fish, a tree was grown. In order to liberate this particular person, the monks would keep on striking the wood, which looks almost like a fish shape, so that the monks can rededicate the merit to that particular person. But I didn't really look into the origin of the wood fish. There are a few different names to it. We constantly use a different term when we chant the precepts. In terms of the gong, the Chinese monasteries also use it, but maybe a bit different than that of the Tibetan region's monasteries. So let it be striking or beating the drum or whatever it is, whatever kind of sound or instrument it is. Let it be the sound of the gong or the sound of drum. Over here, the Buddha said that the sound of the bell and the drum follows one another in succession. And then that's how the sound is made. Let it be drum or bell, the sound would keep coming in sequence. Over here, we rather use the sound of conch. We would blow the conch, which is quite important. I think the practitioners over here do place great importance to the sound of the conch. But some people's conch are missing, or sometimes people would fall asleep before even to blow the conch. And some of you are not very good at blowing the conch, and the sound doesn't sound very beautiful. Rather, it sounds like an yak. According to the sutra, it says, let it be the drum or the bell, let it be the conch or gong. The sound of such that signals the teaching of Dharma. Once upon hearing it, one would be exempt to fall into the three lower realms. So whenever we blow the conch, we need to keep that in our mind. We need to practice it, because at the time of turning the Dharma wheel, the celestial beings offered the right turning conch to Shakyamuni Buddha. With this kind of causes and conditions, whenever we blow conch, it is an auspicious sign. So I need to emphasize this. We need to practice it, and we need to cherish this tradition. So today we will pay attention together of listening to the sound at this part, because it could lead us to recognize the nature of it. The Buddha over here says that, what do you think? Do these things come into existence because the sound comes to the region of the ear, or because the ears goes to the place of the sound? Whatever sound it is, once it comes to your ear,
就是声音呜就直接从那边来到你的耳边呢，你的耳朵呢就是呜就是直接就是就本来我们这个耳朵是一块嘛，就是然后阿难的耳朵不知道怎么样，就是然后是不是你的耳朵跑到声音那儿去呢？就是然后声音跑到
The Buddha asked, is it that the ear goes to the sound, or the sound comes to your ear? And then the Buddha continued to ask Ananda, saying that again, Ananda, suppose the sound comes to the region of the ear. Similarly, when I go to beg for food in the city of Shravasti, I am no longer in the Jeta Grove. He said that if the sound of the conch or from the drum directly comes to your ear, it is like that whenever I go to beg for alms into Sarasvati. Again, there are different Chinese translations of Sarasvati. The Buddha said that if I were to go to Sarasvati to beg for alms, as an individual, the Buddha goes there to beg for alms. Then how could there be another Buddha stays in Jeta Grove? Similarly, if the sound comes from the conch or drum, if the sound definitely goes to the region of Ananda's ear, then neither Madhgalayana nor Kashyapa would hear it, because if the sound is something solidly existent, just like if the Buddha left Jeta Grove and enters into the city Sarasvati, then you won't be able to see the Buddha in Jeta Grove anymore. Similarly, if the sound has an entity, then that means if the sound travels from the instrument to the ear of Ananda, then none of the other people would be able to hear it, even as the great arhats such as Madhgalayana and Kashyapa, and even less the 1,250 Shramanas who, upon hearing the sound of the bell, come to the dining hall at the same time. At that time, the Buddha had his retinues, the 1,250 Shramanas, including both the bhikshus and bhikshunis. Then at that time, nobody would be able to hear it, because the sound is an entity, and you cannot separate the sound. If it enters into the ear, the region of the ear of Ananda, then how could the other people hear it and gather at the dining hall anymore? The Buddha says that if the sound directly goes to Ananda, then how could all the other Shramanas hear the sound at the same time? That is, how could the large Sangha all hear the sound at the same time? Because the function of the bell is to call everyone to the dining hall. There could be another explanation of this particular word that is used.
这是第一个方面的观察，或者的话，对，就是应该。
Again, suppose that the ear goes to the region of the sound, Usually we don't say that. If your ear were to go to the sound, go to the drum,
如我贵住其陀宁种在世罗城这无有我，就是那么这样的话呢，
then
就像
it
是
is
我从那
similar
个
to say that when I
这个
return
世
to
罗
Jeta
城呢，
Grove,
就是没有
I'm
这
no
个
longer
回
in the
来
city
回来
of
以后呢，我到
Vajrayana.
了这个气源金色一样，就是因为佛陀是一个线上是
The
一个
Buddha
人嘛，
as
一
an
个人的话
entity,
呢，那就
as an
从这个世罗
individual,
华城就是回来，回来的话呢，就那边
when
就已经
he
没有了，然后
returned
那边
to
没有
Jeta
的话呢，
Grove,
已经到
he
了
is
这
no
个气源
longer
金
in the
色，就是这
city
样
of
的。那同
Vajrayana.
样的道理就是，那么如果
Similarly,
你的耳朵就是
when
到
you
那
hear
边
the
去的话
sound
呢，
of the
那我
drum,
的这
your
个阿
ear
难的
will
耳根
already
的话呢，
have
就是跑到
gone
那
to
边
the
去了。这
place
边
where the
阿
drum
难呢
is
就是
being
没有
beaten.
耳朵了，或者是阿难
Ananda
他
at
自
that
己也
time
是被这
either
个耳朵
doesn't
牵
have
着，
the
就是
ear
跑
at
到那
that
个故事那儿
moment,
去了。
or Ananda's been
然后
dragged
那个
by his ear to the drum.
如果这样的话，那就是如闻故僧其耳以往
If that is the case,
以
thus
往
when the bell
既故
peals,
之处，
you
就
will
是
not
这样的话呢，你
hear
听到
the
这个故
sound,
声的时候呢，
even the
那么你
less
的这个
that
耳
of
根的话呢，
elephants,
就是
horses,
也
cows,
是往那
sheep,
个既
and
故的
all
这个
other
声音的
various
地方。
sounds around
那么
you.
这个时候呢，就是终身其处不应俱闻，就是那如果在
At
这
that
个时候
time,
呢，就是同一个事件里面就是发出那个庄重的声音的话呢，那你不应该这个
You
声
will
道，因为
not
你
be
的耳根
able
就是跑到
to
那个既故的这个地方去了。
hear
那
other
真在
sounds
哪里
because
享受
your
的话呢，那
ear
这边就是
already
在
went to
这个刚才
the
那个
place of the
集中
drum,
僧
so
众
you
的
will
话呢，
not
又
be
要
able
这个可
to
能跳过，
hear
就是又要这个庄重，就是那这样的话呢，就是如果你的耳根就是
the
跑到这
bell,
个
because
就是
at that
敲
moment
敲
maybe
鼓
there's
的
the
那个地
sound
方
of
去的
bell
话
and
呢，
then
那
there's
这
the
边
sound
庄
of
重呢
drum.
就是根本就是听不到。
If
更
Ananda's
何
ear
况
were
说
to
是
be
那个
dragged
还有
to the
就其
drum,
他
then
的
he
什么
won't be
大
able
象
to
的
hear
声
the
音啊，
bell.
就是牛马的声音啊，
Also,
羊的
Ananda
声音
won't be able to
种
hear
种
all the
声音啊，就是
other
都听不到
animals,
的。
the
就是
elephants,
那这样的
horses,
话，
and so
你的
on.
耳根是只
Ananda
有
will
一个
not
耳
be
根，
able
这
to
个耳
hear
根呢，
other
就
things because
就
there is
属于
only
一个这
one
个声音当中
ear
去了的话呢，
faculty.
那其他的包
If
括就是什
the
么
one ear
啊，我
faculty
们
were
这
to
个
be dragged to that
学
one
学
sound, you
现
won't
在
be
的
able
话
to
呢，就
hear
是有
other
时候是
sounds.
这个怎么讲啊？就是比如说
Nowadays
里面就
in
是这
Larungar
个
we
听到
have
一个
all
这
kinds
个
of
快话的
sounds.
声音的话呢，我们最近不是他
Sometimes
们
we
放在微
hear
信
the
嘛，就是
sounds
这
of
好多拖拉
the
机，
Dharma
嚓嚓嚓嚓
teaching.
嚓嚓
While
嚓
you're
嚓嚓
listening
嚓
to the
嚓嚓嚓，
Dharma,
有
there
一个
is
拖拉机
the
上去了，又嚓嚓
tractor
嚓嚓嚓嚓嚓嚓，有一个下来，又
coming
嚓嚓嚓嚓
back
嚓
and
嚓嚓嚓
forth.
上去了，那这些都不应该这个听得到，
If
对
you're
吧？
only
以前
listening
有什
to
么
the
这个
Dharma teaching, you won't be able
就
to
是
hear
这
the
个山的
other
外面就
background
是有
noise.
这个狼的声音啦，狗的声
In
音
the
啦，
past, we
还有
sometimes
就
could
是
hear
各
the
种这个
wolves
什么乌
and
鸦的声音、戏
dogs
雀的
and
声音，
the
就
crows
种种声
and
音
the
吧。就是但
magpie,
现
all
在
kinds of
因为
sounds.
我们最夏天的时候，就
But
是听到的
nowadays,
最
in
多
the
的声
summer,
音就
the
是
most
这个拖拉机
heard
的声音，
sound
嚓
is
嚓
the
嚓嚓
tractor
嚓嚓
sound.
嚓，好像晚上这个12点钟
It
的时候，
seems
嚓嚓
like
嚓嚓嚓嚓嚓。
even by
这个
midnight,
如果修行比较
we
好的
hear
人的
lots
话
of
呢，哇，就
that
是一看这
tractor
种声音
sound.
呢，然后就是我的耳朵跑到
As a
拖拉
good
机里面去了
practitioner,
呢，拖拉机的声音
I
跑到我
believe
的
you
耳朵
can
里面，
practice
然后这样一观想就是
to
哇，
see
马上就
whether
正悟
your
了，
ear
然后
faculty
他就
went
马
to the
上特
tractor
别
or not.
感恩那个拖拉机的事情，
And
就是
by
让
making such observation, maybe this practitioner would attain enlightenment and would be very grateful to the tractor
他这
driver.
样的这个若无往来，就是那这样观察的话，那就是我的耳根跟那个声音呢，就是既然就是没有这个往来
If there
啊，
is
就是
no
也没
coming
有
or
我
going,
的这个耳根呢没有就是去哪里，
if there is no
然后
coming
声
or
音呢就是也
going
没有
of
来
your
到这里
ear
那
to
这
the
样
drum
实际上
or
呢就是
the drum
业
to you,
复啊，就是业复无闻，就是实际
there
上这个
will be
闻呢
no
就是
hearing
是
either.
实相当中是没有的。是故当者听于
Therefore,
声
you
音
should know that
居无处
neither
所，
hearing
就
nor
是那
sound
这样
has a
观察的话
location.
呢，就是实际上是
By
我们的
making
这
such
个声音
observation,
啊，就
you
是
will
还
be
有
able
呢
to see
就是听
that
听着啊
both the
就是听
sound
着
and
这
the
两个
one
的
who
话呢，就是
hears
这个耳根呢，就是它就叫做是那个
or
根
the
处嘛，就是
the
根处也
hearing
不存在。
doesn't
然
have
后
a
呢，就是
location.
声音的话呢，就是叫
And thus,
尘
the
土，
two places
尘
of
土也
hearing
不
and
存在。
sound
那么除
are
了这
empty
两个以
and
外呢，就是
false.
也不没有的。
There
就
is
好像
no
记得那个
faculty
大智
and
度论
there
当中的
is
话呢，
no
就是这
object
个
that is the
观
sound.
察这个
There's no
耳根
ear
就是
and there's no sound. Other than those two, there is nothing else either. According to Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, there is the observation of the ear faculty, the sound, and then the ear consciousness. I translated a little bit of it. There are 100 volumes in Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra. I translated a bit during the winter, but it's too busy for me in the summer. Do you hear the tractors now? Sometimes I think the sound of tractor sounds quite beautiful because there is a very distinct memory of it. If we were to be taught by our parents that the most beautiful, most melodious sound is the sound of the tractor, then we would very much enjoy the sound of tractor. I guess you can agree with that. Anyhow, it says that thus the two places of hearing and sound are empty and false. Their origin is not in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. Just as stated in the Great Ornament Sutra, it says that just like kongho, the instrument, which is a Chinese harp, the strings and the hands, apparently this particular instrument is not very well played nowadays. It used to be very famous, and in the sutras, this particular instrument were constantly mentioned. So it says that the string and the hand makes the sound, but there is no coming or going. So it says that the instrument and the string and the hand, the three of them, would work together so that the sound would be produced. Just like the kongho instrument, the string, the instrument, and the hand all work together to produce a sound. However, the sound doesn't have any coming and going. After the sound of this instrument was played, however, this particular sound is reliant on the string and reliant on the instrument itself as well as the movement of the hand. Then there is the sound. When we make the observation, there is no coming and no going. The great masters of the past, the Zen masters, as well as great numbers of the Vajrayana masters, by relying on the sound of music, by relying on the observation of the sound of the four great elements, such as the sound of fire, or sound of the water, flowing water, or the sound of the wind blowing on the peak of a mountain. By relying on those sounds, those great masters would recognize the nature of mind, because the teaching is very similar. So let's listen to a sample of the kongho instrument. Could you play it? Good. That was the direct pointing out through the sound. This is the method that's given in the Surangama Sutra. The Buddha then continues to address Ananda to give him the teaching, the instruction on the smell and the nose faculty. Moreover, Ananda, you smell the chandana in this censer. When one particle of this incense is lit, it can be smelled simultaneously through 40 li. 1 li is about 30 miles around the city of Shravasti. The Buddha continued to tell Ananda, saying that, why don't you give it a good smell? Says there is the chandana in the chandana incense that is burning. But I believe this chandana is not the ordinary chandana, though whenever we talk about chandana, it is of great fragrance. In the past, there are different types of chandanas. The chandana of the shape of the snake, and chandana of the shape of the ox head. Those were extremely expensive and very rare to be found. So the smell can extend to 40 li. 40 li is about 20 kilometers. Some of the calculation says that 1 kilometer is about 2 li. Do we have any incense right now? Usually we have incense, isn't it? Didn't I tell you that we're going to need some incense today? In terms of the incense, I would like to remind you that when we purchase incense over here, whomsoever over here buys incense, I hope that you make it clear that we do not make advertisement to any of the factories that makes incense. I heard that there are people simply telling others that they are the sole provider to our incense use. Since Larangar is quite an influential monastery and institution, I hope that people do not use our brand or our name to propagate and to advertise for their products, because we're not here to practice any business. Oh, that's very little bit of incense. Who can smell it? It won't be spreaded for 40 li. You can't even smell it after 4 meters. It's okay, don't be so nervous. Another thing I would like to address, whatever departments you are in, if you are selling anything that is related to the Buddha statue and the stupas and things like such, or the sutras and shastras, I think it's quite important to be smart about it. Let it be the Dharma teachers or the management team. You have to be very careful, because we're not here to make advertisements of the various kinds of products. In the past, I heard that all kinds of products were made on behalf of Larangar and with the branding of Larangar, and they sell it for a very high price. The Dharma teachers over here, they're very good at the five treatises, but not very good in business. And sometimes they're very much used by people with alternative intentions. This is not appropriate. Whatever we use, the Buddha statues and the prayer wheels, all of those products should be scrutinized by the Dharma teachers and the management team so that they won't be sold at a very high price. Some people, I noticed that there are Buddhists and sometimes there are people who pretend to be Buddhists. And people who pretend to be Buddhists, they have the alternative motive to make more money, make more profits. And the pricing would be rocket high by using the name of saying who so-and-so give special blessings to the object, or there is the special consecration of this Buddha statue, and then they will ask for a very high price. They would say that, oh, this is the Buddha statue, that is very special, this is very rare stupa, this is with the very sacred consecration. By those kinds of names, they would sell things at an unreasonable price. I'm not saying this to specifically targeting someone, but I think this needs our special attention, otherwise you could be used, and it's not good for us, it's not good for Dharma teachers, and it's not good for the people who sell them either. Anyhow, if you're at home and listening to this class, then at this time you can lit an incense, whatever material it is made, the chandana or other kinds of incense.
就是说是这里呢，就是如果这个他这里译注的话，那就是译注是好像那个就是比如说是这个1/24的这种量啊，就是很小很小的一点点。
The Buddha said that there is
就是这个像
one particle. The one particle is 1/24
实际上呢，就是在40这个文训的地方呢，就是度这个
1/24 of 量, which is a very small amount of it. That's a Chinese measurement.
也讲到当时这个汉武帝的时候啊，就是汉武帝的时候呢，就是有一点点的那个。
According to the commentary of Surangama Sutra composed or taught by Master Yuan Ying, he said that during the time of Emperor Han Wu, at the time of him, when one were to burn the chandana incense that is as the size of a pea, the fragrance would permeate over 40 li, which is 20 kilometers. And then the fragrance will be permeating and will not disperse for a whole month. Also, within this 20 kilometers, all the disease and famine, all the disease and illness will be all disappeared. So whenever we lit as incense, if it could refresh air and it could uplift our spirit, this would be a great function. But we have to be careful because lighting incense could be a fire hazard, so we have to be a bit careful as well. We need to be safe, right? Lately, I got very interested in fire prevention. Today, I met some of the authorities from fire prevention. At the beginning, some of our management team had various different mindset. But after meeting those authorities, I was very happy, and they were very happy too, because fire prevention is indeed really important. It is a way to protect our life and our wealth, our provisions. Therefore, we need to all keep in mind of fire prevention. Especially over here, whatever buildings that we have over here, and we need to have a fire extinguisher, and we need to have the path or the route for the fire tracks. Those are quite necessary. Otherwise, since everything is so impermanent, we need to have those preventions ready. This is something that we need to place great importance. We definitely need it.
下面就是讲到是什么呢？就是刚才讲到啊，就是这样的这种分享呢，就传导于这个40里的地方。
We've already learned that this Chandana fragrance can be spreaded over 40 li. And then the Buddha said that, what do you think? Is this fragrance produced from the Chandana wood? Is it produced in your nose, or does it arise within emptiness? Where does it come from? Does it come from the Chandana wood, the incense, or does it come from your nose? Again, Ananda, suppose the fragrance is produced from your nose. What is said to be produced from the nose should come forth from the nose.
鼻子当中就是产生这个香的，是吧？那这样的话呢，就是当从鼻处，就是这样的话呢，你的这个鼻。
If it comes from your nose, then from your nostrils or from your nose faculty, there should be the fragrance in there already, but that is not reasonable. Your nose is not Chandana, but your nose is made of flesh. There is no Chandana incense in it at all. Then how could there be a fragrance of Chandana from your nose? That is not reasonable, isn't it? Inside our nose, there is the snot, and then there's the nose hair. Is that how it's called? Can you call it nose hair?
可以吗？眼睛是睫毛是吗？鼻子怎么说？鼻毛可以说是吧？确定吗？
Are you sure?
好嘛。
All right.
那鼻子里面肯定没有赞叹，就是所以只有。
Anyhow, there's the snot and the nose hair in your nose, but there's definitely not even an ounce of Chandana.
然后那个如就是什么沉如问相。
When you say you smell fragrance.
然后沉如问相啊，就是当于这个，再加上呢，你这个闻到那个香是吧？
When you smell the fragrance,
所谓的这个
it
闻
should
到香的
enter your
话呢，就是
nose.
应该是当于这个鼻入，就是一般我们闻香的时候呢，
Whenever we smell anything, it is the fragrance enters into our nose. For the nose to emit fragrance is not the meaning of smelling.
所闻非议，就是你本来一般的这种常识的话呢，就是那个鼻子当中入了这个香气，然后就闻到了。
Normally, we would say that the fragrance enters into our nose, and then that's how we smell the fragrance. So it is definitely not reasonable to say that the fragrance is inside your nose, or the fragrance exuberant from your nose. So it is definitely wrong. Now the second possibility is that suppose it is produced from within emptiness. The nature of emptiness is everlasting and unchanging. And so the fragrance should be eternally present. If you were to say that the fragrance comes from emptiness, as we know that the characteristic of space is everlasting and unchanging, so if fragrance comes from space, from emptiness, then the fragrance should also be everlasting and eternally present. What need should there be to rely on burning the dry wood in the censer? Because usually we need to burn the incense, burn the fragrant wood so that the fragrance would be exuberated and spreaded. If you were to say that the fragrance comes from the space, then what's the point of burning? But nowadays, we definitely need a censer and then burn the incense, and sometimes it takes a long time to burn it, and sometimes it takes a long time to lit it. Sometimes the match doesn't work, sometimes the lighter doesn't work. So that's the second possibility. The third possibility is that suppose it is produced from the wood. Now, the nature of the incense is such that it gives off smoke when it is burned. This particular explanation is a bit different than the Tibetan translation, so I will try to explain it from the Tibetan translation. In the Tibetan translation, it says that if it comes from the wood, it says that the incense will burn and then give off smoke, and then there is the ash that's left over. Then why, after finish burning incense, the chandana incense, after the chandana incense has already degraded to ash and becomes smoke, then there is the fragrance. So this is the first why. And then the second why is saying that if the nose would be able to smell it, why the nose needs to rely on the smoke so that there is the smelling. That's the second why. Then the third why is saying that if it rises to the air, rises into air, and before it has reached the distance, how is it that the fragrance is already being smelled at a distance of 40 li, of 20 miles, of 20 kilometers? How is it that people would be able to smell it in such a long distance? In the Tibetan version, since it has three questions saying why, and why, I think it's easier to understand it. If we were to explain it from the Chinese translation, it says that if it is reliant on the chandana wood itself, then after it finishes burning it will become smoke. And then if the nose faculty would be able to smell it, then the smelling is dependent on the smoke and by the air. But the smoke cannot extend that far. So this could also be a summary. I think this is a better way of understanding it. In terms of fragrance, some great masters attained realization through smelling fragrance. According to the record of the Mount Jizu, there was once a master whose name is Xingche, and when he was practicing at the Jizu mountain, he made the aspiration of practicing meditation by standing for his whole life. He doesn't sit, doesn't sleep. That's his aspiration. So he practiced for a very long period of time, and then later he studied with the master. He studied with Master Yin Guang on the Surangama Sutra, after which he attained a certain level of realization. Later, when he lit one incense, he said that before before this incense finish burning, I will part from this world, and that's how he went to the Sukhavati, the Pure Land, before the incense was completely burnt. At that time, people could smell the fragrance and hear the sound of the Buddha while he passed away. Therefore, whenever we study the Surangama Sutra, I think there are the various very special causes and conditions, the very auspicious causes and conditions. For example, over here it says that the smelling and the faculty we need to look into the various possibilities of where does it come from, where does the smelling come from. You need to make this kind of observation. Therefore, you should know that neither the fragrance nor no smelling has a location, and so the two places of smelling and fragrance are empty and false. Their origin is not in cause and condition, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. There is really nothing that is truly existent. Now, we have already covered the first 6 places, 6 ayatanas out of the 12.